The Smurg by Jessiy. Read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 18. Their peaceful repose was rudely interrupted by the sound of an owl at the window pecking the glass to gain entry. With an exaggerated sigh, Gellert set the bowl of cherries on a nightstand and turned to open the window, huffing with annoyance when the bird clipped him with a wing as he glided past the naked man and over to the bed. The owl landed with an easy grace and a slight ruffling of feathers. "What have we here?" Hermione crooned to the owl as she searched toward the string that held the waiting letter bound to its leg. "Who is it from?" Gellert asked, walking to the bed, having left the window wide open so that the owl could leave the moment it wanted. Apparently it was going to wait for a reply. "I don't know," Hermione said as she kept unfurling a massive letter at least 4 feet long before finally uncurling the last inch, revealing who the message was from. "Marvolo," she answered, then with a furrowed brow went straight back to the top. Gellert leaned over her, showing the bird to the far side of the bed, and read over her shoulder. "My dearest daughter Hermione," it began, and Hermione snorted. In his last letter he called her you if he referred to her at all. He also had told her that she wasn't invited to his home, that he didn't like the influence that she had over Moreau, accusing her of trying to bring the Gaunt names to ruins. Ha! As if he needed any help in that area. And yet, here he was writing to his dearest daughter. If it wasn't so amusing, she would have choked on the indignation. She continued reading. "It has come to my attention that you have invited into your home a noble and yet undeserving revolutionary. As you are a single woman, living entirely alone, I have contacted you to exhibit caution. No daughter of mine should be so blasé about the rules of society. And you, as the last heir of an illustrious family, should be more conscientious about your standing. Poor Tom is going to suffer the indignity of being the adopted relative of such a scarlet woman. We shall all bear the shame of it. As your father, it is my duty to correct any such behaviors and protect your and our good name." Hermione snorted here as well, as if Marvolo Gaunt still had a good name. Why did he believe that he had any right to dictate anything? She was adopted into the Gaunt family to protect Tom from being only in Albus Grass should Moreau pass. Marvolo thought he had a say in her life? Hell no, over a dead body. Fuming, she continued to read. "As such, I have contracted you into a proper pure-blooded marriage." The floor shook, and Hermione was startled out of her own fury and looked up in surprise at Gellert, who sat on the bed, hands fisted, magic striking the wood with the tiny lightning bolts at an alarming rate, causing the whole house to shake. He was beyond rage. He was a man who was completely lost to all reason as sparks shot like a sharp nail from his fists. Hermione's brow rose, and she turned back to the letter, guessing it was Marvolo's high-handed contract of marriage that had set him off. But it wasn't. It was what followed. "Prince has agreed to take you despite a deplorable gaffe you have made. He has even generously offered to pay for the entire thing. Lucky for you, since I'm sure no other respectable family could be cajoled into taking you now." Hermione dropped her hand into her lap and looked up at the ceiling. Rolling laughter bubbled out of her, her whole body shaking with mirth. She struggled to drag in gasping breaths in between bouts of laughter. She fell over, head landing in Gellert's lap. He watched her with a bemused sort of bewitchery. Enchanting was the only word he could think to attribute to the woman he had hopelessly fallen in love with. Gellert swept the hair out of her red face and smiled adoringly at her. "Want me to kill him? I could make it look like an accident." Which must have been the wrong thing to say, because as hard as Hermione was laughing, she was now practically dying. "I'm sure you could," she gasped out, now holding her stomach and rolling slightly from side to side. It wouldn't have been half as funny if the sentiment hadn't first been running through her own mind. She was just as capable as Gellert to rid herself of enemies. What would you have me do? I'll do it." After a few moments, Hermione was able to get herself back under control, giggling only every few seconds. "Better?" he asked her. "Yeah." Hermione looked up at Gellert, reaching out with one of her hands at the same time to cradle his face. "You know you can't leave the property, right?" He grunted, not dignifying that with an answer. Instead, he caught the letter out of her hand and cleared his throat, as he was going to make a huge production over reading the rest. "No," Hermione said, grabbing the letter. She sat up and held it between them at eye level. Her brow wrinkled, and she stared at the hard paper. The next several seconds were awkward for Gellert as he waited to see what she was going to do, when all of a sudden the parchment caught fire, and Hermione's smile turned luminous once more. "Whoa!" Gellert said, jumping from the bed. The fire didn't take long to settle, though. Clearly, Hermione was in complete control of it. "Fire's kind of my thing," she shrugged nonchalantly, thinking of the time she set Snape on fire fondly. "I would say so," Gellert murmured. "But don't you think you should have read the entire letter, just in case he slipped something else unpleasant in there?" "I know something that he doesn't know about the paterfamilias law. No matter what he wrote, it still wouldn't change anything." "Oh, yeah?" "Yes. In my time, Malfoy and I had thought that this may one day be an actual issue for me. He gifted me a very specific vault, and at that time I was speechless from his generosity, only later to find out that the vault is used for Malfoy daughters as dowries. By giving the vault in entirety, he claimed me as his sister. It is why I snubbed everything to do with the Malfoys ever since I arrived this time. That way they couldn't revoke the magic linking me to them. Officially, I share Slytherin and Malfoy lines. The Malfoy have a very special protection on them that no other magical family can usurp. Malfoy blood always takes precedent, so as long as the Malfoys don't think of me at all, with either love nor hate, I should be fine. Only they can truly claim me here, since the Slytherin family is extinct. In this case, Mary bargained to have me adopted into Gauntline for the express rights of care for Tom and any children she will bear. There's nothing magical that binds me to the Gaunts, just an illegal on paper kind of thing." "That is ingenious," Gellert said before continuing jealously. "And who is this Malfoy fellow from your time?" "I would have definitely been bound to my Volo if it weren't for Draco," Hermione began. "Draco, now it is," he darkly murmured. Hermione cracked a smile, unable to avoid enjoying his jealousy and needling him a bit more. "Draco would have gone into politics had things been different, I think. He always knew the ins and outs of pureblood society. I always thought maybe it should have been him who came back. He would have been so much better suited for it. And then again, he has that unmistakable Malfoy hair." Gellert growled and tackled her, pinning her to the bed by her hands, hovering inches away. His enigmatic blue eyes traced the contours of her face, darting back to her lips hungrily. "He couldn't make you feel like this," Gellert whispered, running his nose along the column of her neck. "Maybe he could. We never tried," she said breathlessly, arching her neck to give him better access. "He did ask me to give him children once." Gellert froze. Hermione could feel his jaw working as he ground his teeth together. "Would you have if you didn't come back in time?" "I don't know. We were friends for sure, but we spent most of our childhood hating each other." Gellert sat back on his heels, now straddling her, her wrists still in the prison of his hands. "How did you get from hating each other to him asking you to bear little Malfoy children?" "You seem to forget what I left behind. It was a war, and it was devastating. At the end of it, there was only Malfoy and me left. Everyone I knew and loved was dead. He was good to me, took me somewhere safe, fed me, helped me when I was in shock despite his own crippling grief. Without one word or inane questions, he followed me, supported me. Do you think I would be here changing everything without him? Without Draco Malfoy's help, I would have turned into a wrath who haunted the graves of the dead." For a moment they stared at each other, Gellert's jealous face softening into something resembling gratefulness. Hermione sighed and pushed against him, sitting up when he let her go easily. "Perhaps it is time to tell you everything." "There is more." "So much more," she said, bringing her knees up to her chin, wrapping her arms around them. "I was born to parents that couldn't do magic. You would call me a muggle-born, or more likely, mudblood. They were amazing parents." Gellert made to interrupt, but she held up her hand to stop him. "Let me finish." He nodded, and with a frown settled back against the headboard. "I got my Hogwarts letter when I was 11, just like every other witch or wizard in the UK. A professor came to my house and sat with me and my parents, explaining that I was a witch and that I was accepted to a school that would teach me to use the gifts I had been given. They weren't as convinced as I was about going, but they never, not once, stood in my way. Then I met my best friends. I seemed to turn enemies into friends because Harry and Ron—" She paused, fighting the rising lump in her throat at the mention of her boys. "They didn't like me when we first met. It was only after we faced an adult troll alone that friendship formed. For the next 7 years we battled together, growing stronger, learning magic no one our age should have been able to fling in the heat of battle. I've killed men my father's age. I've killed someone my age. I've used every single unforgivable on others. I've used dark magic. I've created gruesome magic spells that make persons' entrails explode like a shrapnel." Gellert was a mix of shock and lust. He always got excited over powerful magic, even if it did cross into the darker side of things. "My friends and I broke into Gringotts and successfully stole from their vaults." "Whoa, whoa, whoa! And they let you walk back in?" When you are a Hogwarts hunter, that was integral to killing off any evil wizard bent on wizarding Dominion. Yes, they let you back in. The only thing they ever said to me was not to do it again. A light sentence, if you ask me, but they were suffering untenable losses in the war too. The goblins were grateful. Horcruxes? Gellert croaked, shocked into silence, shaking his head. Foolish. It could be so foolish. Tom, Hermione said quietly. What? Merup's son, Tom. He became the monster who made 7 Horcruxes. He was the man who slaughtered, decimated an entire magical community. Tom, the baby you adore? He clarified. Yes. How can you pour such love on him? He's a sweet baby. He will become a monster. Not this time. You seem certain. I am. How can you be so sure? In my past, Tom was born unloved in a Muggle orphanage. You see, Merup hemorrhaged while giving birth. Maybe I should go back a little further. She had kept Tom's biological father under Amatentia for years. He married and impregnated her. She wanted it to be real, and hoping that he would accept her and their son, she stopped giving him the potion. That is not what happened. He despised her, abandoned both. Her family was in and out of Azkaban, but even if they had been in a position to help her, they wouldn't have. There weren't very many memories of him as a child by the time Harry, Ron, and I began collecting memories and information. The few things we did get a hold of were bleak. He wasn't treated very well, and his cruelty flourished under the negligent care. By the time he was old enough to attend Hogwarts, his cruelty was well established. He was a master at hiding it, though. Always the model student. He successfully bamboozled nearly everyone for years and years. Nearly everyone? Tom couldn't fool Albus. I'm not surprised, but Albus had a habit of merely observing, never stepping into changed circumstances except the ones he wanted. She shook her head. Oh, sounds about right. Gellert nodded and ran his hand over her overlapping ones, threading their fingers together. Anyway, Tom grew to be manipulative and extraordinarily powerful, the last living descendant of Salazar Slytherin. He amassed followers. Those who wanted change and glory. Those that wanted power. Those that wanted to be able to be cruel without consequences. He made his first Horcrux at 16 right there in the castle, killing another student who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And he wasn't caught. He was smart, our Tom. He knew of another student who was raising an acromantula in the castle and blamed the death of the girl on them, earning himself a plaque for special services to the school. Damn. The world grew darker after he graduated, where he and his knights toured the world, learning impressive magic that would help them wage war. They wanted to kill all Muggleborns, you know. They wanted magic to be only in magical families. I was treated less than filth by the old families. I was actively hunted for the entirety of my teenage life. They accused Muggleborns of stealing their magic from a proper witch or wizard. It was horrible. Hermione stopped for a moment, glancing up at the canopy of bed curtains. But you weren't caught, obviously, he prompted, now fully engaged in his story. Hermione smirked. No, but the boys and I fell on some hard times. We starved for much of the 2 years we were on the run. It was one such time that the final battle was prompted. We hadn't eaten for 3 days and had resorted to filching crops from where they grew, food we took and could not pay for. Luckily it was June and such foods were plentiful. The problem wasn't that food was or wasn't to be had. The problem was that Tom's men were paying close attention to every farm and orchard, every market, Muggle and wizarding alike. It's how they found me, in the middle of a sugar beet field in the south-west of England. But you didn't die. No. The boys and I had a system, a way of sending messages instantaneously, that allowed me to call for backup. Even so, I spent a solid 10 minutes struggling to survive. It was 5 grown men against me. If the boys hadn't come when they did, I don't think I would have lived through the battle. The owl began hopping from foot to foot, trying to gain attention of the people, obviously annoyed he had been forgotten. He was waiting for a response he would take. Hermione and Gellert ignored the bird, for now. They sound more like family than friends, Gellert said. They were. I had never had any siblings, but once I had Harry and Ron as my best friends, I felt as if I had. You have no idea how many nights I spent nagging them into doing their homework or staying up late to help them fix what they did do. She ducked her head in embarrassment. Or even doing it for them. I shouldn't have done, but it is what it is. Gellert chuckled, imagining a young Hermione browbeating 2 young boys into doing their homework. I spent a lot of time with Malfoy too, after the Order helped him and his mother escape Tom's tyranny. His information was invaluable. He grew up surrounded by magic and luxuries that very few could boast of. It led to the finding and destruction of 2 Horcruxes, and I would say one was easier to destroy than the other.
Why?
One was the Hufflepuff's cup from the Lestrange's family vault. Without Draco's help, I probably would have had a devil of a time getting out. He was the one who prepared us for the traps that goblins lay. Of course, we also had a goblin who was helping us, but goblins have their own sense of honor that doesn't always align to a witch or wizard. The other was not that we couldn't easily get it, it was just Harry. Harry had the scar right here on his forehead, she said, raising her hand and moving her hair out of the way so he could see where Harry's scar might have been. We knew he was connected to Tom. He would feel Tom's emotions, see things through Tom's eyes. He always knew when Tom was near or powerful. We should have known from the beginning that the scar was more than just a magical scar. A part of Tom's already fractured soul latched onto Harry the night he tried to murder him as an infant. An unintentional Horcrux. Our dilemma was how to get rid of it without killing Harry in the process.
But he died.
He did. He died facing Tom at the final battle. He took Tom with him, though.
You were lucky you had destroyed all the Horcruxes when his men found you in that field.
Don't I know it? I was taught, whilst looking into coming back in time, that the battle's outcome was a great triumph for wizarding kind, and if I tried to make changes, I could undo that very tenuous victory.
But you don't think so?
I'm confident that Tom will be different. However, I'm not so naive to believe that his personality had nothing to do with his rise to power. He will be the embodiment of what Slytherins stand for, cunning, ambitious, ruthless. But perhaps Tom will channel that iron will into something incredible. When I read through Tom's private journals, I'd grieved that such a magical might was lost to us. He could have been a changer our world needed. If Tom still grows into the monster I knew as a child, I will take him down myself.
And what, my dear, will be the tipping point for you? When would you deem him monster enough to take out?
A Horcrux or a murder?
Gellert nodded. So I'm not yet on your takedown list either?
Are you trying to convince me that you had not murdered anyone? Don't you remember telling me about Ingrid and Leon's father?
That was different. He was abusing the boy. And I did what I had to do, not just with him, but for anything that stood in the way of changing the world. Injustice like that needs to be fought against.
You could justify just about anything with the right mindset, Gellert, Hermione began. Do you think it was easy for me to let Tom be born? To give him a second chance at life? Who the hell do you think you are, that you can pick and choose whose lives matter?
Look at the cauldron calling the kettle black, he said dryly.
I give my word that I would try to shed my biases against the families who tried their damnedest to kill me and mine. And except for Albus, who had rightfully earned my ire in the past, I feel as if I had lived up to the spirit of the promise. You, on the other hand, see people as means to an end. Can they help you in achieving your goal? If so, how?
You wound me,
he said, grasping his side as if she had plunged a dagger into the tender flesh to the hilt. We both know that isn't true. Hermione rolled her eyes as he flashed her his killer smile.
We tackle our problems differently, you and I, he said. You move politically, while I find force is more effective.
I'm not going to talk in circles with you, Hermione said. The owl, finally ready to flip his shit, bounced onto Hermione's knee. Bounced onto Hermione's knee, gripping tightly enough for her to feel how sharp his talons were. She hissed in pain, drawing her attention to the impatient owl.
He seems to be waiting for an answer,
Gellert said with amusement. Hermione sighed and pulled a small piece of parchment, ink, and quill from the side-table drawer. Ma volugant, go to hell and take your marriage proposal with you. Signed, the girl who apparently destroys ancient houses. P.S. People who live in glass houses should not throw stones. She quickly rolled up the paper and tied it to the owl's leg, smiling as if a weight had been lifted off of her shoulders.
Is there anything else I should know about before I bind my poor innocent soul to yours?
Gellert asked, fingering a lock of her curly hair. Hermione snorted. Well, there could be, but I don't remember at the moment. How about you? Any jilted lovers that I should be aware of?
None that would care about my current life and activities.
Well, there are a few. What about Vinda?
What about her?
I was under the impression that the two of you were lovers.
What gave you that impression?
After you were imprisoned in Ermengarde on my original timeline, your journals were rounded up and tried for war crimes. Vinda was tried as a spy and your sometimes lover.
Oh, I didn't know that being my lover was a crime. Anyway, you are more hell-type than I. He chuckled.
So she said, but the evidence was damning.
It always is when the mob is out for blood. Facts and reason fly right out the window.
Hermione chuckled. In your case, they have both.
I'm a law-abiding man who has mended his ways and is currently on day 2 of living out the sentence laid on from the highest courts of law."
"You haven't even been here 24 hours yet."
"Your point."
Hermione sighed and shook her head. Sometimes he was impossible to win against. His thinking was so convoluted, so wily, he would have been a Slytherin had he attended Hogwarts. He could twist around any Ravenclaw to make any point, just for the sake of argument. Hermione got up from the bed and made to go into the loo, throwing a saucy smolder over her shoulder. Gellert was on his feet in seconds, letting doors slam shut behind him as he reached out and grabbed Hermione around her waist, pulling her back into his naked body.
"Always the tease."
He grinned into her shoulder, laying kisses here and there. Turning in the circles of his arms, Hermione encircled his neck with her arms and pulled her body flush, reaching up on tiptoes to kiss his lips.
"You like it," she murmured.
"That I do," he replied, running his hands up and down her body, memorizing her as if he were blind. To be continued. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Smurg by Jessiy, read by Ella Max Mabella. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, AO3, Instagram, or Tumblr.